Jimmy.
Where the hell are you at? Where the hell am I at? That's what I'm thinking right now.
Look at this. I got this light coming in. It's like the chosen one, but not so much, right? Like I'm in the middle. I'm trying to find the best lighting situation here. It's a beautiful sunny day in northern Wisconsin. I'm inside today, Jimmy, because the hunt is on, Jimmy. The hunt is on. There are people outside killing deer left and right. And I don't want to, I'm glad I'm not in a van down by the river. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm just going to tell you right now. If I was, look at this. This is it right there's the spot. Look at me. Look at this. Fantastic with the lighting. So I'm happy that I'm inside, Jimmy, because I'm telling you right now, there's guns everywhere in northern Wisconsin right now. People are just dropping deer like they're going out of style, which is fine with me because then they don't end up on my car. I'm good with that. What's this? What is like a fan? What is this? What's going on? What's happening in my sister? I have no idea what's happening. That didn't help. Nope, that didn't help. I'm over there now. Now I'm all set. Okay, here we go. Now we're all set. Look at this. So here's the thing that we should do. We should get on these calls earlier because then we could take care of all this stuff before we actually start talking. Now today I may have been there at like 7:59. That's neither here nor there, Jimmy. That's neither here nor there. I think maybe we should set up a system. Maybe the system says that we get on 15 minutes early and perhaps talk about what we want to talk about instead of leading right into the show saying, hey, here's what I was thinking about today. And then I got to think of something right now. Because this is what our life is? Jimmy, I'm going to tell you right now, we got to be a little bit more proactive in terms of what's happening in this situation. I'm just going to say it. And when I say we, I mean me, but that's okay. We don't need to talk about it like that. I'm just telling you right now. Well, and you got your glasses on today. How exciting for you today. This is what a day. Man, this is one. Did you get your workout in today? Probably not. So here's the thing. I think we need to have a little bit more planning time. Maybe we should get together here in the next couple of weeks. Maybe just do a little planning session of some sorts.
Now, that is a good idea. Why don't we do that?
Good.
We'll get together next week, buddy.
It's great to see you, man. 2 times in 1 week. Look at this. Look at me. I'm excited.
That's right. This isn't about what we're going to talk about. This is about just catching up.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about those Hawks? Oh my God, it's so hard to watch. But,
hey, the Badgers won. Hawks won. The Packers are not going to win, but that's okay. We'll keep pushing. Right. I was talking to somebody the other day that like Wisconsin football. I may have been talking to you. Wisconsin football fans have been so like spoiled for years. If you think about literally 2 quarterbacks for the Packers since the early 90s, the Badgers have been at least good for years. They've had the most winning seasons, I think, in NC of all teams in the NCAA, consecutive winning seasons. And it's just like last night, it was on the line whether or not it was even going to continue. So, I mean, we've been pretty spoiled. I think we didn't realize it at the time, but it's the way that it works. So we'll keep it rolling and see how it goes from there. Yeah, you guys went to the game yesterday, huh?
Yeah, it was a good time. It's always a good time hanging out with my kiddos and Keela's first Iowa football game. So really? Fun. And then, of course, we topped it off with some Poly Ice pizza last night. You can't beat that.
And, well, yes, you can. Wig & Pen beats it, but other than that, otherwise you can't.
That is a good point. We'll just give some.
You're right there.
Wig & Pen here in a second. So.
Yeah, that's right. We got to get a sponsorship out of these people, man. We love Wig & Pen.
That's right. Nope. Then we're heading to see my parents right now. I'm going to go hang out with them. See my brother. He's going to be doing some magic, so watch him. And then
I love it.
Back to Chicago tonight, so hang out.
Fantastic. Good for you, man. Good for you. So I'm excited to talk to you. So one of the things I just actually put a video out, like a throwback video out, because this is the week, that a lot of people are going into a break, and it's either like a 3-day break over for Thanksgiving, or our staff, we had the full week break, typically over the last like 4 years or whatever. And one of the things that we always talk to our people about was like, what does it look like to actually model a break for those that we serve? Like if we're overwhelming them all the time throughout the course of that break, we're not really actually giving them a break. And sometimes in an effort to inform, we overwhelm. And I think that's kind of where, I think we just in taking it today, that whole overwhelming piece of what we do, this job gets to be overwhelming, but I think there are some things that we can do as leaders to help people not become overwhelmed, but also put us in a situation where we can create momentum for each other while we're not overwhelmed. I think its job gets to be just really, really, all encompassing. And then we're trying to figure out like how we can help people. And I think a lot of times what ends up happening with us from a leadership standpoint is when we don't recognize that they're getting overwhelmed and we don't intervene until they are overwhelmed. Now we've got a real problem because we didn't set it up early and they're already past the tipping point. So I think there are some things that we can do, not only for those we serve, but also for us. I think sometimes when we get overwhelmed, we overwhelm others and we serve. And so I think one of the things that would be interesting, and you tell me if not, but the idea of what can we do to make sure that we don't overwhelm ourselves in a leadership role? Because if we overwhelm ourselves, then it automatically gets placed on the people that we lead, because then essentially we're modeling being overwhelmed, which means that becomes the norm in terms of what is, or we end up, not being in the right mindset, and then that impacts those that we lead. So I think that might be, just in terms of, how we can make sure that we maintain our own, our own path and keeping people in the right, mindset, was just, popping to me. But I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I think that's this whole idea that, whatever you want to call it, the power of no, let's just say for a second, I think has so many different perspectives, so many different lenses, and so many different ways to see it, right? Because not only is it from the power of no, from the person, maybe it's the leader who has a difficulty time saying no, right? What are all the reasons for that? Why does that happen? From the other perspective of I'm the recipient of the no, and how do I respond to that no? And so that's another angle we could look at it from. And so, you kind of started saying this idea of, if we're all overwhelmed, and that's the whole idea, right? Is that we can't all, especially as leaders, if we're modeling constantly that sense of urgency, that high level, then other people are watching us, and we actually kind of elevate them to a high level, right? So this whole idea of this level 10, like, oh, everybody's on fire. And so there's all this stress. You can kind of feel it amongst the staff, and everybody's feeling that pressure. But I think one thing that leaders don't recognize sometimes, and I think this is the danger for all of us in school leadership, is that a lot of us take that 10, let's call it a 10 for a second. A lot of us take that 10 home with us as well.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy for us. It certainly isn't healthy for our families, and the guilt that comes with that and all the other issues. So how do we create a culture, right, where we give each other permission to be able to say no? And that's kind of one thing I look at it. So I think the first thing I would say about that, Joe, is let's just take it from a leader's perspective. And sometimes we do say no. And sometimes we say it, though, because we have the authority to make that final decision. And sometimes the leader, I know I struggled because there were things I felt very strongly about, right? Most of us have opinions about certain things. And for some of us, those opinions about how we feel about things are based on our experiences. And so if we feel very strongly about something because we're passionate about it, or because we've had that experience, or it aligns with my core values, let's say, sometimes as leaders, we may struggle and say no to people about certain things because from our perspective, we just can't accept that. We can't. But the lens of that for me was this, is the truth of it. Sometimes either in that moment or just sometimes just in general, we're not right.
Right.
Maybe we didn't see it, and maybe we were right or wrong. The other issue is sometimes we have to allow people to experience that disappointment or to experience whatever comes with their mistake, as long as we protect them to the point that it doesn't cost them too much, if that makes sense. You don't want to put someone in harm's way, right? We don't want to do something or allow something that's going to jeopardize or is unethical or immoral or illegal, right? But there are things that if someone wants to make a decision with something, and even though it goes contra us as a leader and how we feel, I do think there are moments in leadership where we have to be able to have a conversation and say, listen, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to let you do it. Okay. Because this is why I don't like it. I'm going to explain it to you why, but I'm also going to let you go with it and see what happens and let people make their mistakes as well. And when we are wrong, and it does turn out, then I think we've got to circle back. And we talked about the importance of circling back as a leadership strategy to build culture, because it invests time in people. It shows people you care. I think we have to go back and say, hey, you know what? You were right. I'm glad it turned out. That was great. I'm proud of you, whatever. And so I think the point for me is we're not always right. And when we're not, we have to own it. And yet, at the same time, there are moments that we'll have to let people, but I want to protect them a little bit. But I think sometimes we let people make their errors and mistakes and learn from those mistakes as well. Anyway, that's just something I'm thinking about.
So two things. I think you're right on the side of when it turns out okay and it worked out, you have to follow up and say, hey, I'm proud of you. You did a great job. These are some things that I didn't see that you ended up doing, and it worked out really well, and you're thankful for that. The other side is just as true. If it doesn't work out, the worst thing that we can say to them is, I told you so, right? I told you this wasn't going to work. When we come back to them, then we build them back up and say, I didn't, the direction was concerning to me, and these were the reasons, and some of them kind of came up. But at the same time, here's some things that I learned when you went out and did this, and now I'm better for it too. So it wasn't wasn't complete failure. It's only a failure if you quit. Like, so how do we make sure that we take what we learned in that spot and now move it forward? But I think one of the best things that we can do is come back when it works and say, you were absolutely right, and I learned a lot out of it, and thank you, because it impacted me just as much. If it doesn't work out, the worst thing I think that we can do is say, I told you it wasn't going to work. Like, see, if you would have listened to me, then we wouldn't be in this situation. If you're willing to say, give it a try, I don't know how I feel about it, but give it a try, then you've got to be willing to follow through on the other side and say, all right, so it didn't work. Okay, so what worked out of it? Because we can always take something out of it. What are some things that we can do? And to be really honest, Jimmy, in that space, when it didn't work and they're down because it didn't work, I think it's really important that not only do we build them up, but we get them back on the horse to move forward and say, all right, so it didn't work, but here are a couple things that I thought were going in the right direction. We just needed a couple of breaks and they didn't come through, and that's okay. So why don't let's go right now. And then we follow up with them on that. So then they know that, not only can we model what it looks like to, have when it doesn't work the way we wanted, but how do we get right back up and try it again? So that's been a big deal, I think, for any leader that wants to help build a team when things don't go the way that they're supposed to go, is what does it look like to acknowledge that they didn't go the way that we had intended. At the same time, that doesn't mean it's done. And we always learn something from it. So can we get ourselves going back in the right direction while also making sure that we as the leaders say to them, I'm still with you, man. Like, I'm still with you. Like, it didn't, just because it didn't work doesn't mean that I'm washing my hands of this thing and getting done with it. Let's keep going and figure out what it looks like. Because when they have more ownership of what it looks like, and they know that you're invested in their ownership of what it looks like, now the whole conversation changes.
Okay. Well, if you're just joining us this morning on the weekly show with myself and Joe Sanfilippo, we're talking about the power of no. Joe, I don't know if you saw this, but Jason Markey just chimed in. Did you know Jason Markey? Talk about saying no. Let's say this. Jason no more marathons. Jason just ran his 5th marathon in California. Congratulations, buddy. That is awesome. And not only did he run it, and by the way, Jason Markey, Joe Sanfilippo always says no to running. So see, he's doing a great job of modeling that. But Jason has ran 5 and improved each one of those, and I think ran like a 3:13 marathon. So good for you, man. Jason Markey.
I love him. We haven't talked in a long time. It's cool to see his name pop up there. Yeah. Good to see you, Jason. It's been too long, my man. Way too long. Right. But congratulations. Keep it up and keep rolling. And
that is if you're gonna run, no to the running, says Joe.
Yeah.
Joe,
running. I was just talking about running. I'm like, this whole concept of running. I think
you're a liar. You're a liar.
Listen, the only time, no, I'm not running. So the only reason to run is if you're being chased by a wild animal. And even I hate running so much that if I was chased by a wild animal, I might just be like, maybe it's just my time. Like, it was a pretty good run. Like, maybe it's just my time. I'll just stay here. It's fine. He's going to get tired of me. like that kind of stuff. Yeah, you did. We did try to run in DC. I remember.
One of those Wisconsin reindeer would be chasing you.
Yeah, you know what? It's probably right. They probably beat me down too. That's the way that works. Jason's right. He tried to get me to run in DC years ago. I don't know if I've ever laughed at anybody that hard. He's like, "Hey, we're gonna go for a run tomorrow." I'm like,
Joe, here's your growth as a leader. I got it.
Yeah.
1 minute runs to school, Joe.
Oh my
No more 1 minute walk. 1 minute run.
Like, where am I walking? Where am I running, Jimmy? I don't have a job.
That's true. Good point. That makes two of us now.
1 minute walk to the couch, man.
No, why is it two people are doing the weekly show on leadership and neither one of us have a job? That is not good. Now that we think about it, everybody, what the hell are you all doing?
Good night. Hey, it's been fun. Thank you so much.
Right. We got to go out to the golf course now. We got something to do. We got to figure out something to do. Joe, what you were talking about is exactly right? Those effective leaders, don't keep score. And that's kind of what I think you're saying. Like, hey, we can't go back.
Exactly.
Gave permission. And not only just keep score, but like we keep bringing it back up. So there will be another time. And we can't say, yeah, well, remember last time, right? None of that nonsense. Because our job as leaders is to build more leaders, to build their confidence. We don't want people hesitating. I mean, obviously, they already feel bad enough, right? Nobody wants to fail. Nobody's trying to mess something up. So, again, we're always from the heart of a teacher, and effective leaders see that. We all start our careers as teachers, and we have to remember to continue to teach, right? And the other thing is this, Joe, is we have to expect as leaders when people are passionate about something or they want something. Like, for example, internal candidates, right? Internal candidates, the perfect example. One of the hardest things we have to do as a leader is say no to somebody within our organizations who aspires for another position within our organization. And I think we struggle with that sometimes. We don't know what to do with it, right? We feel loyal to these people. We feel these people deserve it, right? Well, I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble sometimes, because I think we're always in that quandary with what to do with that. And I think that's why we have to be really transparent, really honest, really upfront. But we should also know what these people aspire for. It shouldn't catch us off guard, right? And so if we know there are people aspiring for leadership roles in our organizations, and we know that, and they're currently in a situation where they're not performing at the level we need them to perform at. In other words, we're looking down the road and we're saying, hey, this person is aspiring for leadership. And I know at some point I'm going to have this position come open. And if right now I know they're not doing the things they need to do, then I need to start having that conversation with them now.
Right.
Because what we don't want is not have the conversation, then the position opens, then they apply for it, and now we don't know what to do. Because we already know we're not going to give them the position. I mean, I've talked to enough leaders right now. I have to say, you have to be really careful with that. And they're like, well, I know, but I said, but listen, you have to understand this. Look what's going to happen. You put yourself in a position as a leader when you don't have a conversation with someone right here. Later, they come over here and they want to apply for a position. But you already know you're not going to hire them based on the history of their work performance over here. But because you never talked to them about it over here, now you're here. And now you're like, well, I'm going to just go ahead and interview them. But I'm like, but you already know you're not going to hire them, right? Yes. I said, okay, so what happens after you don't hire them and they say to you, well, you knew all along you weren't going to hire me.
Right.
Now what? Now you're in a position you have to lie. Because what are you going to say?
Absolutely.
You're right. I was never going to hire you. I went ahead and interviewed it. No, you're going to say, no, that's not true.
I was thinking about it. I thought maybe you'd be a big fit.
Yeah, I thought you'd be a good fit. You just weren't ready for it. You just didn't do a very good job at interviewing. You didn't sell the committee. I mean, all this, it's all lies. Right? It is. So,
it's all,
So we have to be careful about that. No. So that's another perspective. And then we also have to know this, that when we do say to no to people, we should expect them to be disappointed.
Right.
I'd be disappointed if they weren't disappointed, right? And the idea of, look, this is how badly they wanted this. And there are those moments where we do believe people should apply for positions because they do have the skills, but they are beat out by somebody who's just a little bit better. And that's hard on a leader when we see an individual who we want to help get to that position. And in this moment, we can't do it because they just aren't quite what we need. And it's not that they did anything wrong. And I think that's the emotional ripcord on us that just tears at us, right? Just tears at us leaders. because it's that emotional toll. So any of us who've ever been in that position where we have to say no to somebody that we care about and they are skilled, but not just quite ready. I think that's where we have to have a conversation. Say, look, I expect you to be disappointed. I know you're frustrated with me, but listen, I'm telling you to hang in there. It's going to happen for you. And I want to be a part of helping you get there. But in this moment, I'm just going to be really truthful. Here was the situation. So you know what you and I need to do? You and I need to get to work, and I need to do a better job of putting you in a position to set you up for success, because there will come another time. And next time we're going to get this thing done. And so again, I think that transparency and that ability to have those conversations that are very authentic and real, that isn't this, hey, you know, the committee didn't want you nonsense. No, you knew you weren't going to hire them. So we should have had the conversation back here. So that's another perspective of no that I sometimes think about too, right? And for those of us who have never hired someone and then they pout and they get upset and now they don't talk to you and they're mad at you and they gossip about you, it's just a reminder that you actually made the right decision.
Right.
Because people who can't handle no and then become that person, well, guess what? Then they're demonstrating their own leadership skills right now. And you made the right decision, because we shouldn't be hiring people that are going to turn around and be upset at you now, because it is a hard enough decision as it is. Unless, again, we're being disingenuous with individuals. So anyway.
So when you came back, a couple things that you mentioned there that struck me. And one is I love the idea of having the conversation early and knowing and understanding where people are coming from and what their path is, or what they'd like to be their path at some point. Just knowing what that looks like is really important for two reasons. One, you may want them to aspire to a spot that they don't want to aspire to. Like they don't have, like I remember I mentioned to one of, I believe, our best teachers in the building. And I said to this person, I'm like, have you ever thought about leadership and, and being a principal at some point? And the person was like, no, whatever. And then I walked into their room the next day, and the person was like, you made me really mad yesterday when you asked about, being a principal. And I'm like I was trying to build you up. And the person was like, I want to be a great teacher. I love teaching. I love everything about it. And when we talked yesterday, you made me think that I should be doing something else. And I want to be a great teacher. You know what I mean? And so what was cool was the person was willing to say something to me. And that's great. That made me feel really, really good. But knowing and understanding what they want to do and helping them with that journey is really important. And what you said was having the conversation up front and knowing and understanding that positions may come available, but also that you put yourself in a spot where you know what they want to do too. It helps you out along the way. And then you mentioned when they do get the no, and you say to them, I didn't do a good enough job of X, Y, or Z. I'd check you on that one, Jimmy. I really would, because maybe you did. Maybe you did. Maybe it was just, it wasn't a good fit. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was like, did you? Or if you didn't have the conversation, then you can say it. But if you had the conversation early and you stepped talking and giving them opportunities, and then it didn't work out, I'm not going back and saying, maybe I didn't do a good enough job of getting you prepared for this situation. Maybe it just wasn't the right fit. That's just what it is. Sometimes that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. That sometimes it could be that, but it also could be the other way, right? I guess it
could.
Depends how you felt, right? If you felt in your heart you didn't, but you're right. We also know people, hey, listen, we all have individuals. We've worked with them.
Yeah.
And at some point, all we can do is be fair to these individuals, communicate to these individuals. But the reality is some people just don't have that skill that we're looking for that need. So I do agree with you on that. And again, but I would still be honest about that.
Right. That's what I mean. When you go early on it, then you know it. But then you get to that point, like it's just not a good fit. Because I think the thing that we need to say to that person then at that point is maybe it's not a fit here, but maybe it's a fit somewhere else. And if I can help you with that process, please understand that I'd like to do that. Yeah. But let's talk about what it looks like.
Yeah. That was really tough, Joe.
That's hard.
Right? Yeah. I go back and forth on that, right? And I think I think this is an important conversation to have, because I'd be curious to see what our listeners think on this. But this one's tough, right? Because I see it more as I think it's how we phrase it, right? But let me just say this. I also think it's the relationship that we have with these individuals. In other words, do they trust you or not, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. Because if they don't trust you, I feel like it doesn't really matter what we say. it can come across pretty disingenuous, right? And then we're not taking ownership. It's like we're skirting around it.
Right.
And again, I think effective leaders are courageous leaders. They don't like having these conversations. But gosh darn it, that's part of the job, right? Part of our job is to have those conversations. I mean, I could look at it from a leadership perspective and say, hell, some of us, I know early on I didn't have that skill. So hell, I avoided it too. I mean, I was so different, right? So I think that's part of it. It is a skill set, but I like the phrase that you said, right? And again, you'd have to think through this a little bit, but there's always this idea of having a conversation with someone to say that they're not the right fit. Okay, let's just take it from there. I agree with it, but that's the skill, how careful you have to be with that. So I actually like it better if we pose it as a question. So it'd be more like, so, hey, Joe, let me ask you a question. So look, I know you're disappointed. It didn't work out. Mm-hmm. We've worked on this. We've worked on this. We've had this conversation. So let me ask you, why do you think it didn't work out for you this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, because you don't like me, because there's politics involved. Because you think that
Merlin wrote, right?
That's right.
So here's what I would say. So that's exactly what would happen. So this is good. That's exactly the response somebody might give us. So there's where we have to be careful. And this is kind of goes back to a couple episodes ago where we talked about the fix it mode. I think right there that's a button pusher, right? They're coming back at you. And I think this is why it's important, Joe, when we talked about frameworks before, the framework of how to have that conversation, especially through a no conversation, is I got to be careful, though. That's a trap, right? For me to jump and now get pissed off and get upset and come right back at him. And what do you mean? And then get defensive. I need to be able to have a framework that says, tell me more what you mean by that, Joe.
Yeah.
Because again, I don't want to make this about my behavior, but again, this is why managing complex conversations is probably one of the hardest things that leaders have to deal with, because we're talking about emotion, right? We're talking about emotion, people being upset, people not getting what this person's been striving for this job forever. And they feel like you let them down and you were never truthful with them before. And you should have told me if I wasn't going to get, all these things that come from it. And Joe, I'll let you come back on this, but Jason shares another good point is, imagine being the candidate that does get hired over the person that wants it. We better have a conversation with that person too, to say, hey, you need to know something here. There was an internal candidate and you and I are going to have to monitor that how that relationship goes. And again, we'll have to go have a conversation with the person that didn't get hired. How are they going to help this person? And sometimes they don't want to because they're wounded. And man, there are 100 different ways to look at this. And again, I always think it goes back to the relationship you have with them, and the honesty of the conversation, because that's your integrity and that's all you can do at the end of the day. Like you can't own their frustration and they're being upset at you. If not, we'll just get killed. So anyway, that's the conversation.
Two things. The first thing is it goes back to you mentioned it goes back to relationship, but we want to be really cognizant with people that listen to this and the people that we talk to and the people that we coach and everything that goes along with it is, what does it really mean? Like we can say that you got to build relationships, but what does that really mean? And this kind of, if you dive deeper into that, we talk about what all of these interactions, all of your interactions with people leading up to that tough conversation are going to determine what happens after that tough conversation. That's just what it is. Like if you've never talked to this person or never helped coach the person or never been invested in the person, then when it doesn't go their way, it turns into, you don't know me well enough to know that I'm right for this job, right? But if you've had conversations and not like deep, meaningful, like you have to just be in the space and see what's going on. And so when you do that and it doesn't work out, they're still going to be upset. But it's not going to be because you don't know them.
Right.
It's better about that. That's when you can get into the fit conversation, which is really hard because that can come across as disingenuous because it's what everybody says. So how do you break the script on that to make sure that they know it's not just, you're not just feeding them a line and you're not, but sometimes just saying it comes across as feeding them a line. So it goes back to, what are you doing on the front end? I loved what you said about, when you know that things are coming up that people might be interested in, what are you really doing to coach them along the way to give them the best shot? Because at some point, that decision is going to have to be made. You can also have the conversation coming up along the way with, this is because you're modeling what it looks like, not only in that position, but every other position that's hired. Because when they see how every other position is hired and that it's a committee decision and that this is what we're looking for and that these are the skills that we look at, and we always come back to what the core is in those interviews in terms of bringing people, on board, then they have a pretty good indication of what it needs to look like when they're in that room. And if it doesn't look like that, now you can come back and instead of saying to them, why do you think it didn't work out? Now you come back to the core pieces that you've already modeled for years and years and years and have the conversation around the core principles that you've already discussed and how they didn't come out in the conversation, in the interview, in the whatever it was. But it doesn't come down to the almost like a versus mentality, which you can put yourself in that situation. When it comes to when you bring it back to what the core values are that you're looking for, when it comes down to hiring people moving forward, and you've modeled that in every interview up to that point, now it's not easy, but it's easier. It's an easier conversation because you're transparent in terms of what you've been looking for, how you hire, and what it looks like moving forward. So you're all of these interactions and what it models. And that's why it's so important to set frameworks up for the work that you do. And I didn't for a long time. I hired by emotion or hired by feel, hired by, who was the best in the room for 50 minutes. Like, we did it way too often. And it obviously comes back to bite you from time to time. But at the same time, when you have more frameworks established, the likelihood of it coming back to get you is less. It may still, but you're just trying to put yourself in the best situation. Just give yourself the best chance along the way. And I think, we've talked about frameworks all the time because of that. Yeah. And that's an important piece of what we do. And I don't think it's talked about nearly enough.
Well, it's funny because even when you were talking just now, I was writing everything down. Like you just were talking right through a framework, right? The importance of the clarity of expectations. Like that'd be the first step, right? Was everything clear? Like what you expect, what they're doing, where they're coming, where we're going, those types of things. Core values you talked about, right? All this should be based on the foundation of those core values, and people should know what those core values are, and people should be working towards those core values to be a part of that organization. So we all function when it involves our behavior from a core set of values. How is that being communicated, right? You talked about that, the importance. Here we go again, the connections, these relationships, the connections, and how we're investing in people and whether we know our people and what they aspire for and where we're putting that time in. And of course, that circle back, because the truth of the matter is we as leaders are going to have to say no a lot.
Right.
And we know that's difficult because we know when we say no, people are going to be hurt. People are going to be disappointed. People are going to be frustrated. Half the people are going to be upset at you. There's a bazillion reasons why we hesitate to say no. But I do think saying no is a powerful leadership trait that we all need to get better at. And the last thing I would say about that is sometimes saying no, and in the moment when people are hurt, sometimes it is the first step to a closer relationship.
I agree.
That if we can get through that bond sometimes becomes even stronger when we're honest with the no, when we don't play games with it, when we just say, hey, listen, I know you're upset at me. I know you're frustrated, but listen, here's why. And I'm going to hopefully show you over time that, and we want them to show that. But again, we've all been let down. I mean, we know that sometimes when we heard no, we landed in a better place later because of it.
100%.
So
absolutely. I'm like the perfect example of that. Yep. I'm the perfect example of that. When you're an internal candidate and it doesn't work out and you're just devastated that the group didn't want you. And then literally 3 weeks later, you end up in the most incredible place that's ever happened to you. There's no way that we would be having this conversation. I heard that was Fall Creek,
Wisconsin, where you ended up.
Yeah, it was. That's exactly right. Yep.
That's exactly right.
In all of that, all the stuff, I was in a bigger district in Eau Claire, and I loved it there. At the same time, I just wanted a different challenge. It didn't work out. And I was devastated, and I got the whole "you're not the right fit," that, and it was tough. It was very tough. But what happens next? If you keep yourself moving, sometimes some really incredible things happen, and this is exactly what happened to me. And again, I don't know if we'd be doing this. I don't know if I would have been. I don't know if we ever would have met, honestly, if I wasn't in that spot, because the district that I went to was substantially more inviting in terms of getting out and doing the stuff that we're doing. So I got to be like, you just don't know in the moment. And sometimes when you can get to the next level, it changes the conversation about your entire pathway, which has been wonderful. So saying no or reacting to when no is said to you is really important. And man, that was like, we got to come back to that. I think we talk about, we could keep coming back to that framework conversation, but this was awesome. And I think we should, honestly, I think we should close it here, man. This was great. This was like, maybe we shouldn't talk about what we should talk about before we get on, man. That was just riffing for 35 minutes. It worked out okay. I'm going to go back and listen to it.
Hey, Joe, just got to give yourself a chance, right? But
It's my guy, man.
Everybody, we wish you a wonderful Thanksgiving. Hopefully, some of you get a break this week. I know Joe and I will not be back next week because we're going to try to model that as well, spend time with our family. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks and see y'all here. Thank you so much for following us. Thank you for jumping in. Thank you for our regulars who keep coming back every week. Thank you for not saying no to us.
Yes.
We appreciate you. God bless you. And Joe, thank you. Good to see you, my friend. And enjoy your family, Joe. Okay?
As well. You as well. Take care, everybody.
Don't put that fan back, okay? Put the fan back. Okay?
Nobody, I'm going to say no to you. Get out. Go on.